Imagine this. You're on a flight, minding your own business, and suddenly a flight attendant demands you vacate your seat for someone else. But here's the twist. The seat was yours. And it gets worse. What happens next causes an all-out chaos in the sky. What's going on here? Is this racial discrimination? What will you do if it were you? Watch until the end, because this shocking situation is just the tip of the iceberg. If you're part of the Black Visionaries family, hit that like button right now and subscribe for more jaw-dropping stories like this one. It was an ordinary afternoon aboard Flight 320, a commercial airliner cruising smoothly through the clear skies. The cabin was peaceful, with passengers reading, working, or resting. The engines hummed softly, and the flight attendants moved up and down the aisles, tending to passengers' needs. The flight seemed like any other, until a situation arose that would shatter the calm and send ripples through the entire airplane. A woman, confident in her stride, made her way down the aisle. She was in her early 30s, wearing a tailored dark blue suit, with her glasses perched elegantly on her nose. Her black, shoulder-length curls bounced with each step, and she walked with a certain poise that was hard to ignore. She had just settled into her window seat, 12A, a perfect spot to enjoy the views or, perhaps, take a brief nap. She buckled her seatbelt, prepared for what she expected to be a routine flight, one she'd been on countless times before. But what happened next took her completely by surprise. A young, white flight attendant, no older than 28, approached her seat. The flight attendant's name tag read Megan. She had blonde hair tied back neatly in a bun and wore a perfectly pressed blue uniform, the traditional look of a flight crew member. As she neared the woman's seat, she wore a bright smile, but it didn't seem to reach her eyes. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said politely, "you can't sit here." The woman, taken aback, blinked in confusion. She scanned the seat number and glanced at the boarding pass in her hand. "What do you mean, I can't sit here?" She replied, her voice calm but confused. "This is my seat. I paid for this seat." Megan's smile tightened slightly as she replied, "I'm sorry, but this seat is actually reserved for another passenger. You'll need to move." At first, the woman thought it was some sort of misunderstanding. Surely, this couldn't be happening. She looked at the seat number again. It was hers. She had specifically selected it when booking her ticket. There was no reason for the flight attendant to tell her to vacate it. She stood up, prepared to speak up for herself. "I'm sorry, but I don't understand. This is my seat, and I'm not moving. I've been assigned this seat since I boarded." Megan remained firm, now pointing to a man who had just stepped onto the plane. He was dressed in a sharp business suit, and there was an air of entitlement surrounding him. "That passenger here holds a premium ticket. I'm afraid you'll need to vacate your seat so he can take it." The black woman's confusion turned to anger. Her chest tightened, and she stood tall, unwilling to back down. "You've got to be kidding me," she said, her voice starting to rise. "I've already sat down. This is my seat, and there's no reason I should be forced to move." Megan, still wearing a stiff smile, didn't back off. "Ma'am, if you do not move, I'll have to call security. This seat belongs to him, and you'll need to leave." The woman's eyes narrowed as she looked at the man now seated in the window seat. He didn't seem to notice the tension. He had barely acknowledged the confrontation and appeared comfortable, settling in with a drink as if this were all part of a normal flight experience. But the woman was no longer able to accept the situation. "No," she said, standing her ground. "I'm not leaving. I've paid for this seat, and you have no right to tell me I can't sit here." As she spoke, her voice was no longer quiet. Other passengers, hearing the exchange, started to glance over, their attention peaked. Some were whispering to one another, others shifting uncomfortably in their seats. The tension in the cabin was becoming palpable. Several passengers were now watching the scene unfold. From behind her, an elderly white man, who had been sitting quietly, spoke up. "That's not fair," he said, looking toward the flight attendant. "She's been here the whole time. She shouldn't have to move for anyone." His words stirred a murmur of agreement from a few other passengers. Some even began to nod in support of the woman, making it clear that they didn't agree with how she was being treated. Megan, noticing the growing support for the woman, shifted uneasily. The flight attendant was caught in the middle, looking to de-escalate the situation but unsure how to proceed without further inflaming the tension. She quickly signaled for another flight attendant, who approached the scene. The tension only heightened as the second flight attendant, along with a supervisor, arrived. The supervisor, a middle-aged man with a stern expression, stepped in and began to try to mediate the situation. "Ma'am, we understand your frustration," the supervisor said, trying to calm the woman. "But the seat is reserved for this passenger. We have to ask you to move." The woman, now standing in the aisle, looked from the supervisor to Megan. Her anger flared, but she kept her voice steady. "This is wrong," she said. "You're discriminating against me because of my race, and that's unacceptable. I paid for this seat, and I'm not moving." The supervisor didn't seem prepared for this kind of response. He faltered, unsure how to continue. And as the confrontation grew more heated, the entire cabin was alive with whispers, hushed conversations, and the growing realization that something was seriously wrong. "Look," the woman continued, her voice unwavering, "this isn't just about a seat. It's about respect. You can't treat me like this." Meanwhile, other passengers, now fully aware of the situation, started pulling out their phones. A young woman across the aisle had already begun recording, her phone capturing the tense confrontation. "This is going viral," she said, already uploading the footage to social media. "People need to see this." Before long, the hashtag Seatgate was trending on Twitter. The video was spreading quickly, and what had started as a private dispute was now becoming a public spectacle. The flight attendants were visibly shaken, knowing that the situation had spiraled far beyond their control. They were trapped between the need to follow company policy and the undeniable pressure from a growing public outcry. With each passing minute, more people were involved in the debate, whether through online posts or heated exchanges within the cabin. The once quiet, uneventful flight had turned into a battle over something much bigger than a seat assignment. When the plane finally landed, the scene was far from over. The black woman was escorted off the plane by security personnel who had been summoned to handle the situation. Megan and the other flight attendants remained on board, visibly uncomfortable as the passengers disembarked. The man who had taken the woman's seat seemed oblivious to the uproar, quietly gathering his belongings. The aftermath of the incident was immediate and far-reaching. The airline issued a public apology, promising to investigate the situation and to reevaluate their policies. The incident sparked debates on social media, with some defending the woman's right to her seat, while others sided with the flight crew. But the damage to the airline's reputation was already done. In the weeks that followed, discussions about racial discrimination and privilege gained new momentum, with many pointing to this incident as an example of systemic issues that still needed to be addressed. Hashtag Seatgate continued to trend as more people shared their stories of unfair treatment in the airline industry, calling for better policies and more sensitivity to such situations. The woman, though shaken by the events, knew she had stood up for herself and for others who might face similar challenges. In the end, her fight became more than just a dispute over a seat. It became a symbol of the ongoing struggle for equality and respect in the face of adversity.
If you're part of the Black Visionaries family, now is the time to hit that like button and subscribe because you won't want to miss more jaw-dropping stories like this one. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for more eye-opening content.